She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. In a fragile skull, I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes and goes, you know. And she's got me living in a chemical love, and I try to find the strength to know when she comes back to me again. I'm gonna come up from my hiding.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. Today's video is about a case that I had literally never heard of, but as soon as I read an article about it a few weeks ago, I think it was in like People magazine, and this article popped up and I was like, well, I've never heard of this case before. And I thought it was another case because the victim in this case shares one of her names with another victim in another case. So I got them confused. And so I started reading it thinking it was the other case. And then I was like, this isn't that other case. But it was so upsetting to me when I was reading it. And I couldn't stop thinking about it because I felt like I was missing something. You know, I felt like there's no way that any law enforcement entity could be this bad and this inept when dealing with what I think is a very obvious crime. So I had to look into it more to build on that one article I read, and there still isn't really a lot out there about this case, and I still feel like there's something I might be missing, but I also feel like this case and its implications are super important, so we need to talk about it, and we need to get the name and the story of LeeAnn Hartleben out there, because I haven't seen really anyone talk about her besides her family members who are going really hard online and in social media trying to raise awareness and get justice for her. But before we dive in to LeeAnn's case, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Bright Cellars. This may or may not surprise you, but I love wine, and I love not having to leave my house. So that's why I also love Bright Cellars. Bright Cellars is a monthly wine club that matches you to delicious wines that are tailored to your tastes. I have worked with Bright Cellars in the past, and I still get my wine box every month because it's just that good and just that easy. And honestly, I fear the day that I run out of wine. I fear the day that I go to grab a bottle of wine to open it and to consume it, and I realize I'm out of wine. So this way, with Bright Cellars, I don't have to make as many trips to the wine store because Bright Cellars provides me the wine I need, the wine I want, delivered right to my front door, and it is just so easy to get started. All you have to do is take a quick 7-question quiz, and Bright Cellars matches you with wines from all over the world that are curated to your taste palette. And the cool thing is every time you get a box of wine, you can improve your future matches by rating the wine you got. Every bottle that Bright Cellars sends you comes with a wine education card, and this card will tell you about the tasting notes, best temperature to serve the wine at, the origins of the wine, and pairing suggestions. So for instance, in this month's Bright Cellars box, I got this Cactus Park Pinot Noir, and it is the bottle of wine I'm most excited about trying because I love Pinot Noirs. This is from California. I love a California Pinot Noir. They're super light, really easy to consume, and I was also drawn to the label. I think it looks really cool. But here are the wine education cards that come with each bottle, and I like that the label is on the front of the card, and I save all my cards kind of like adult Pokemon cards, adult like trading cards, but I think they look really beautiful. And on the back, it tells you all about this wine. And it tells you a lot of things. The tasting notes in here, like the strawberry, raspberry, dried flowers, chocolate. I'm going to pop this open tonight. I cannot wait. And then there's a little QR code in the bottom right-hand corner of the card. You can scan that, rate the wine, and that way Bright Cellars knows that if you like this wine, they send you more wines that are like it. And if you don't like it, they'll send you different ones. And Bright Cellar's expert concierge team is uniquely qualified to handle your wine-related questions. Not only do they offer amazing and friendly customer service, but they do have sommelier training as well, so you're not alone. You know, if you think about it, it's really cool because you could go into this experience with Bright Cellars knowing nothing about wine, and after a few months of trying and tasting and learning, you could be pretty well-versed in wine and impress your friends and family when you have them over for dinner. If you love wine or you want to love wine, check out Bright Cellars because for a limited time, you can get $50 off your first 4-bottle box. All you have to do is click the link in the description box, take the taste palette quiz to see your personalized matches, and then start sipping. Supporting sponsors of this channel helps to support me and this channel, and I am so lucky I have great sponsors like Bright Cellars to share with you. So a big thank you to Bright Cellars for letting me offer everyone watching this amazing limited time offer of $50 off their first 4-bottle box. Do not forget to check Bright Cellars out. Thank you so much to Bright Cellars, and let's dive into the case. On the last video I posted about Stephen and Katie Pladell, somebody in the comments said, oh, it seems like we're in North Carolina, like so much with these cases. And I was like, you're right. It does seem like we're in North Carolina a lot with the last few cases we've done. And with this case, we're going back to North Carolina. LeeAnn Fletcher Hartleben was born on July 28th, 1981 in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. And that's where she lived all of her life. Now, Kitty Hawk is located on Bodie Island and is part of what is considered the Outer Banks. The Outer Banks is a string of barrier islands off the coast of North Carolina and southeastern Virginia. So also in the Outer Banks is another island you might be more familiar with, and that's Roanoke Island, where, you know, the huge mystery of the original colonists and how they completely disappeared. And I actually have a video on Roanoke. If you're interested, I'll pop it in the description box. But that's what I think of when I think of the Outer Banks. But Kitty Hawk is also a very popular tourist town. With a population of just under 4,000 people, Kitty Hawk attracts tourists and visitors who want to see the place where the Wright brothers took their very first flight, piloting a plane in the air for 12 seconds above the sand dunes. And it was here in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, that 38-year-old LeeAnn Hartleben lived in a small cottage located at 990 West Kitty Hawk Road with her 2 children, a 13-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son. Now, LeeAnn Hartleben, she clearly loved being outside. She was an avid hunter. She enjoyed fishing, especially surf fishing, and she was always in her garden. But LeeAnn was also known as a Martha Stewart type because she really enjoyed not only gardening, but entertaining, baking, and decorating, especially decorating for Christmas. LeeAnn's cousin and close friend, Trisha Cahoon, who's also become LeeAnn's biggest advocate, she said that LeeAnn could be brutally honest, which obviously could be off-putting for some people, but LeeAnn was also incredibly giving, and there was nothing that she wouldn't do for someone. Trisha said, quote, she had a personality like she was a social butterfly. Everyone got along with her. End quote. But on July 22nd, 2020, at 9:24 a.m., a 29-year-old man named Jay Tolson called the Kitty Hawk Police Dispatch and reported that he had just found his friend lying in the bathtub and bleeding from her nose. And he said she wouldn't wake up. He said that his friend had been drinking and she'd fallen in the kitchen. And that friend was LeeAnn Hartleben.
My friend, she's laying in the tub. She won't wake up. I think she fell last night. I'm not sure. There's blood coming out of her nose, so I can't get her to wake up.
Okay. Do you think she
Still
fell?
breathing really heavily,
Do you think she fell?
Yeah, she had been drinking. She fell in the kitchen.
How old is she?
I think she's 38.
Okay.
She's breathing really loudly. I just can't get her to wake up.
Okay. Are you all right? And you said she is breathing.
Yeah.
And you said there's bleeding coming out of her mouth?
Out of her nose a little bit.
Okay.
LeeAnn.
Does she respond to you when you ask her, when you talk to her?
No.
Okay.
She shuffled once.
Has she moved at all?
She shuffled a little bit, but then she started convulsing a minute ago, and I pulled her up to make sure she wasn't going to throw up.
Mm-hmm.
Now she's stuck.
Okay.
She's drooling a lot.
And Jay Tolston was obviously not just LeeAnn's friend. They were actually dating, and he was living with her in her Kitty Hawk cottage. They'd met at a party the previous June, and Jay had told LeeAnn that he'd just been kicked out of the place he'd been staying. And since her kids were out of town, and because she felt bad for him, LeeAnn offered Jay her spare bedroom to crash in for a few days until he could find another apartment. Now, Tricia Calhoun, LeeAnn's cousin, she said that at the end of the day, she believes LeeAnn's giving nature probably was part of her downfall because LeeAnn was very open, very giving. She would do anything for anyone, including letting somebody that she didn't really know that well crash at her place for a few days so that he wasn't out on the streets. But of course, with Jay and LeeAnn, one thing led to another, as it does, and the relationship soon turned romantic between the two. But according to LeeAnn's cousin Tricia Calhoun, the new couple had recently hit a rough patch after Jay became a little possessive, among other issues that he had. So it looks like right before she died, LeeAnn packed Jay's things into a plastic bag and put that plastic bag on the front porch on July 20th, telling Jay that it was over and that she wanted him to leave. Now, the last time anyone spoke to LeeAnn Hartleben was on Monday, July 20th, 2020, at around 4:30 or 5 p.m. And 2 days later, EMTs were responding to her address to find her unclothed, bleeding, and unresponsive in her bathtub. The report says that LeeAnn appeared to be sitting in the tub with her head on her chest. She was breathing, but she was unresponsive, and her pupils were size 4 and sluggish in response. LeeAnn was airlifted to Centara Norfolk General Hospital in Virginia, and when she arrived at the hospital, she was placed on a ventilator. But the doctor would later tell her family that LeeAnn was brain dead. The doctors also told LeeAnn's mother that LeeAnn was suffering from blunt force trauma that was inconsistent with a fall, unless that fall had been off of a building. On top of that, LeeAnn had bruises all over her body. She had bruises on her arms, her chest, her neck, her stomach, and LeeAnn's family sat next to her bruised and battered body for 3 days in that hospital until July 25th, when LeeAnn finally succumbed to her injuries and passed away. Now, the family immediately felt and knew, in a way, that something didn't seem right. And they were aware that there'd been some issues between LeeAnn and her younger new boyfriend, Jay Tolston. So they appealed to the Kitty Hawk Police Department to investigate LeeAnn's death through the lens of foul play. Don't just believe Jay Tolston when he says she fell in the kitchen because she was drinking some beer and hit her head. Actually look into this as if he could be her attacker, which, they should be doing that already, right? But Tricia Calhoun, LeeAnn's cousin, she says the police were not interested and they were slow to investigate, even though there was clearly something not adding up about Jay Tolston's story, that LeeAnn had been drinking the night before and fallen in the kitchen. Tricia Calhoun said, quote, "They were saying there was no crime. There was no crime committed, that she was drunk, fell, and hit her head, and there you go." End quote. And honestly, as I was going through this case, it really reminded me of the Ellen Greenberg case from Philadelphia, which I did 2 videos on, maybe 6 months ago at this point, where Ellen Greenberg was found, stabbed, several times to the back of her neck and to her back. And the police were like, yeah, this is clearly, self-inflicted. Even though her boyfriend's the one who found her, this is very suspicious that somebody would be drinking, fall, and hit their head, and then have this amount of blunt force trauma. But according to LeeAnn's family, that's what the police were initially saying, although the police department has a little bit of a different narrative. So officers from the Kitty Hawk Police Department went to LeeAnn's cottage in the presence of a family member, and they collected a few pieces of evidence: a blood-stained comforter, a fitted sheet, and a pillow from LeeAnn's bed. But they didn't treat her house like a crime scene. They didn't secure the house to prevent contamination of evidence. They didn't bring in crime scene techs or forensic people. They didn't even look through LeeAnn's SUV, which was parked at the cottage. And even with the presence of blood being found in the bedroom, no forensic tests were done. I guess that no one in law enforcement thought to ask the question of why blood was found in the bedroom when Jay had said that LeeAnn had fallen in the kitchen, and he had found her in the bathtub. Now, additionally, LeeAnn's cousin Tricia had found LeeAnn's cell phone on a coffee table in the living room. The police hadn't collected that either, although it had been in plain sight while they were in the cottage. So Tricia brought the cell phone to the Kitty Hawk police, hoping they could, maybe extract information from it, see if there was anything suspicious or evidence related to LeeAnn's death on the phone. But according to Tricia Cahoon, Kitty Hawk's chief of police, Joel Johnson, refused to take the cell phone. They don't really give a reason for why he refused to take it. They don't say why he told them he didn't want to take it. I did reach out to Tricia Cahoon on Facebook to see if she could, clear a few things up for me because I did have some questions. She hasn't responded yet, but if she does, I'll make an update video with all the questions I have because I have a list of questions for Tricia. So when LeeAnn's family realized that the police were not going to take the investigation into her death seriously, they hired a Raleigh-based private investigator firm. And reportedly, one of the private investigators reached out to Kitty Hawk's chief of police, Joel Johnson, to set a meeting. And allegedly, the response that Johnson gave to this PI was, quote, "I don't need to meet with you. It would be a waste of time." End quote. So obviously, LeeAnn's family is feeling pretty pissed off. Like, why aren't you looking into this? This is clearly suspicious. There's clearly foul play in our opinion. And the family took to social media, creating the online campaign Justice for LeeAnn and basically making a ton of noise and a ton of waves on Twitter, calling the Kitty Hawk Police Department to the floor to answer for their clear lack of interest in seeing justice done. On July 27th, 2020, the Kitty Hawk Police put out a statement saying, quote, "We are aware through social media posts that there are many in the community that are very interested in the investigation into LeeAnn Fletcher Hartleben's death. We would respectfully ask that all who are concerned please be patient and allow us to conduct this investigation in an objective and thorough manner." End quote, which is fine, right? Because, of course, we all want to see law enforcement carry themselves in an objective and thorough way and carry out investigations in an objective and thorough way. And they had publicly announced that they were looking into LeeAnn's death and that they did have a person of interest, her boyfriend, Jay Tolson, in a possible assault. But days and weeks went by, and although the police questioned Jay Tolson, no arrests were made, and there was still no forensic investigation done at LeeAnn's home, the scene of, the possible crime. And then, on August 11th, the Dare County District Attorney, Andrew Womble, who was getting a lot of heat from the community due to the social media campaign, he also came out, and he made a public statement. And this was out of character for Tromble and for the DA's office, as Tromble himself noted in his statement, saying, quote, "Releasing statements regarding ongoing criminal investigations is not in the ordinary course of business by the district attorney's office. However, in situations where the integrity of law enforcement is called into question, I feel I have no other recourse. As district attorney, I took an oath to do justice and to relentlessly pursue the truth wherever it may lead." End quote. I want to pause for a moment and say I completely support this statement, and I don't believe that early on in an investigation the public should be getting a ton of minute-by-minute updates. Even though we may want that, we honestly have no right to expect it, especially that early, because giving out too much information can compromise the integrity of an investigation. We've seen that, we know that. However, if what the family of the victim, LeeAnn Hartleben, are saying is true, that the police initially tried to convince them that LeeAnn had definitely died from falling down drunk, and that the police didn't even want to check her phone for evidence, and that the police didn't immediately seal off her home and bring in CSI, you've already compromised the integrity of the investigation yourself. That's my stance on it. And I also believe that even if the general public doesn't know exactly what's happening behind the scenes, it's in everyone's best interest to at least keep the family members of the victims somewhat in the loop. Let them know that you hear them, that you're working on it, that, you see what they see, and maybe you're also a little suspicious and you're going to pursue every lead, even if you don't get a strong start. Even if the police initially tried to tell the family that it was an accident, at least now tell them okay, we see what you're talking about and we are pursuing it and we've talked to him and this is our plan. And then just, ask the family respectfully to try to not share that information around. In a situation like this, I think it's very problematic when somebody like LeeAnn dies and the doctor is saying basically, she has a ton of blunt force trauma to her head, and this didn't happen by accident. That's what the medical professionals are saying. And then the police are like, what are they talking about? This definitely happened by accident, right? And then we keep going down this path where the family's feeling like not only are they not being heard, but there's potentially a murderer walking out there. And that person who's walking out there and potentially murdered their loved one isn't going to face any justice. So they're going to start to get upset, and they're going to take to social media, and they're going to make a lot of noise. So acting outraged and clutching your pearls as the DA because your precious police department was called into question, that's not really the move, because if you had done your job properly to begin with, the family wouldn't have felt the need to make so much noise and make so many waves. And the public pays for the police department. Police officers and district attorneys are supposed to be public servants, and that means when the people who pay the bills have a question or a problem, it is your job to take that seriously and respect it, especially if you're the reason and your behavior's the reason that everybody's, got their panties in a bunch to begin with. Anyways, DA Tromble goes on to say, quote, "In light of the recent public scrutiny surrounding the death, I have decided to release a statement regarding the continued investigation of this matter. At this time, our office is awaiting the official autopsy report from the medical examiner's office in Virginia. No decisions regarding potential criminal charges will be made by the district attorney's office until we receive this report." End quote. Okay, fair enough. So when the autopsy report was released to the public, we read that it stated LeeAnn had died from complications of blunt force trauma to the head with hepatic cirrhosis and hepatic failure, which basically means LeeAnn had blunt force trauma to her head. She also had cirrhosis of the liver, and she'd gone through, liver failure. Now, the cirrhosis may have been a result of chronic drinking, but LeeAnn's cousin Tricia Calhoun, who's a nurse, believes that LeeAnn was deprived of oxygen after she received her injuries for long enough that this caused her organs to begin shutting down, which led to the liver failure. However, the autopsy report listed the manner of death as undetermined, meaning they were unsure as to whether LeeAnn had gotten these injuries from an accident or from being attacked. And I think it's important to note that, not only did she have blunt force trauma, but once again, bruises all over her body. And not really all over her body, not on her legs or her lower body, but her upper body, her neck, her chest, her arms, her abdomen. I think that the medical examiner probably should have looked at that and said, maybe blunt force trauma can come from an accident, but do you get all of these bruises from drinking a couple of beers and then falling down on the kitchen floor? Does that what happens when you fall on the kitchen floor? I don't know. Some of LeeAnn's family members, along with the private investigator, went to LeeAnn's house on July 29th, 2020, and they took pictures and video of LeeAnn's cottage. And they also found a bunch of stuff that law enforcement either didn't see or either didn't care enough to take into evidence. And there's a video of this walkthrough on YouTube. Tricia Calhoun posted it, and you can see, the house looks pretty normal, if not a bit messy. On the front porch, there's a plastic bag of clothes. We believe that those are Jay Tolson's clothes, the ones that LeeAnn had packed up and put out onto the porch when she asked him to leave and said it was over. Now, inside the house, you can see, standard things, baskets of laundry that either need to be washed or folded and put away. There's a box and some bags of empty beer cans and bottles in the kitchen. There's some dirty dishes in the sink. And then we move into the living room, and you can see there's a couch with some pillows and blankets on it. There's a white coffee table, which I believe is the same table that LeeAnn's cell phone was left on. And there's a fireplace with a long couch cushion laid out in front of it. There's also a plant on the floor, some boxes of Christmas decorations, and I'm going to tell you what I think the setup in the living room means and what it says about the crime scene in a little bit. But then we move from the living room into a narrow hallway that's off the kitchen, and off of that narrow hallway there's a bathroom and the bedrooms. Now, to the naked eye, the bathroom looks pretty normal besides an overflowing garbage can, but then when you get into LeeAnn's bedroom, you stop because there's clearly something not right here. There's 2 bloody pillows on the bed, and there's blood all over the bare mattress, a lot of it, right? Concentrated mainly at the top of the mattress where your head would be, and then the middle of the mattress. But there's also some blood at the foot of the bed, and most of the blood is in the center to the right of the mattress. If you were standing at the foot of the bed and looking up towards the head, you would see that the blood was to the right and sort of in the center, not really a lot on the left. And I really just don't understand how any police officer could have walked into this house knowing what state LeeAnn was in and knowing what Jay Tolson had claimed happened. Remember, LeeAnn fell in the kitchen and he found her in the bathtub. And none of these police officers would ask themselves at any time, if LeeAnn fell in the kitchen and ended up in the bathtub, why is there so much blood in her bedroom and on her mattress? This does not look like the scene of an accidental fall, not even at first glance. And that's not all the camera captures on this first walkthrough through LeeAnn's house. The people at the house taking the video actually move the mattress. They pick it up, they sort of flip it over, maybe to see how deep the blood went or if there was more blood on the other side, or maybe because they saw spots of blood on the box spring. But they move the mattress, pick it up, sort of like push it out of the way, and underneath they find a long-sleeved red shirt that looks to have, at one time recently, been drenched with blood that is now dried. So there's a bunch of dried blood on it. And the shirt's red, but it has like white stripes on the sleeves, so you can see darker red areas on the shirt where the blood is, and also you can see blood, red stains on the white portions of the sleeves of the shirt. So even though it's a red shirt, you can definitely see the places where the blood was, and there's a lot of places on that shirt where the blood was. Next, the people taking the video and the pictures in LeeAnn's house, they moved on to LeeAnn's SUV, and in the back seat, they found a fitted sheet balled up with what looked like drops of blood on it, and the fitted sheet matched the sheets that were on LeeAnn's bed. And after discovering this evidence, the private investigators set a meeting with the assistant district attorney, and they hoped that this new evidence and video footage would be enough to prompt the Kitty Hawk Police Department to go back into LeeAnn's home and process the scene correctly. Looking for traces of blood, looking for evidence of a physical altercation. Representatives of the private investigator firm met with Joel Johnson, who's Kitty Hawk's chief of police, as well as a Sergeant Brian Strickland and the ADA, Jeff Cruden, and the purpose was to basically debrief the authorities on what the firm had discovered during the course of their investigation, which included not only the video and the pictures from the house walkthrough, but witnesses that the private investigators had dug up and talked to, and information garnered from these witnesses, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So the firm turned over all the evidence they'd gathered from LeeAnn's house, including her cell phone, the fitted sheet found in her SUV, and the woman's shirt that appeared to be covered in dried blood. Now, according to a video on YouTube that Tricia Calhoun posted, for the next 19 days between July 31st and August 18th, the private investigators collected more intel. They requested public information from the town of Kitty Hawk and from the Dare County government. They spoke with over 60 individuals and developed 4 primary informants, immediately letting the police department know of any information that they gathered from these, investigations, from talking to witnesses, from their informants. They made calls, they responded to texts, they monitored social media for clues or tips, and they waited for the Kitty Hawk Police Department to finally go in to process LeeAnn's home. But nothing happened. The police didn't do that. And after 4 weeks of nothing happening, at least as far as the family and the public could see, the private investigators entered LeeAnn's home again with the permission of LeeAnn's family and with the intention to test for blood stains using Blue Star Forensic Blood Reagent, which is a chemical that you can spray on surfaces or fabrics to reveal blood or blood stains that have been wiped off, washed out, or that are invisible to the naked eye. It's like luminol. Basically, previously invisible blood stains, when sprayed with this chemical, will produce an intense blue glow. It's widely considered to be the most effective blood reagent for use at crime scenes or in the lab because its extreme sensitivity allows the detection of blood traces with the naked eye up to dilutions of 1/100,000. And the Blue Star reagent doesn't alter the DNA of the revealed blood, which is great because that allows for the blood that's found to be tested and then compared. Now, they actually did this over the course of 2 days because after the first day, they ran out of the Blue Star chemical and they had to order more. But let me just say, over the course of those 2 days, that house lit up like a Christmas tree. When I saw it on the video, I was stunned. I was like, how is it possible that the police did not do this already? Like, Like, how is it possible that they didn't do this already? Why would this not be one of the first things that you do when a crime like this happens? And it's clearly not an accident, because the doctors are saying it's not an accident, and the family saying that LeeAnn had problems with her boyfriend who was living with her, the same one who happened to be with her when she died, who called 911. And then there's blood all over the mattress and all over the bedding. And literally, the police say this looks like an accident, and they don't process the scene forensically. So it's just blowing my mind. Like, there has to be something I'm missing, right? I also have an email out, a call out to the Kitty Hawk Police Department. I called and asked to speak to the person who was on the case just so I could, verify, because I don't want to be over here, smack talking them and being like, how useless are they? But if that's what happened and they did not forensically process this crime scene, they are negligent and they did drop the ball. And I wanted to kind of get their side of the story to see if what I'm going to say in this video was true. And they have not responded to me yet, but if they do, I will make an update video. So let's go over what they saw in LeeAnn's home when they started spraying the blood reagent. There was a laundry basket sitting by the washer and dryer, and it looks like clean clothes out of the wash, out of the dryer. And there's a towel inside that laundry basket that completely turned blue when it was sprayed, as if it had been saturated with blood before it was washed. There was blood found on the floor near the washer and dryer, blood found on the inside of the clothes hamper, as well as on another towel in the clothes hamper. There was a significant amount of blood found on the kitchen floor. There was blood on the couch in the living room, blood on the floor in front of and next to the couch, blood on that long couch cushion that had been placed in front of the fireplace. And if you want to know my theory on that now, I think someone washed the blood off the couch and the couch cushions and then placed that longer, bigger cushion in front of the fireplace to maybe speed up its drying, or to maybe even just get it out of the way while they continued washing portions of the couch. There was blood found on the white coffee table, as well as inside the fireplace. There was blood on the door frame, leaving the kitchen and going towards the bedrooms and the bathroom, as well as on the door frame of the bedroom and the bathroom. There was blood on the door handles, on door jambs, on the walls of the hallway. Inside the bathroom, the sink lit up with cleaned off blood. There was blood down the front of the bathroom cabinet under the sink. There was a lot of blood on the wall at the side of the sink where the toilet paper holder was. There was blood on the handles of the cabinet above the toilet and on the wall next to the bathtub by the towel rack. There was also blood on the handles of the bathtub. They said it was behind the handles, and blood in a portion of the bottom and sides of the bathtub, mainly concentrated towards the front of the tub where the drain is and where the water, turn on knobs are located, but there was no blood in the rear of the bathtub. Inside LeeAnn's bedroom, there was blood found on the handles of the closet, as well as on the inside of the bedroom door handle, the bedroom floor, and of course, as we already saw, blood all over the bed and the pillows left on the bed, even though the bedding had been stripped. Now, what does all of this mean? I don't know for sure, but if I was looking at the places the blood was found and you asked me, based on what I know, what I think happened, I'd say there was probably an altercation and LeeAnn was attacked. And maybe Jay Tolson was telling a grain of truth, like Casey Anthony, because it does look like she was most likely attacked in the kitchen because of the copious amounts of blood found on the floor. It looks like LeeAnn was probably hit hard on her head, probably more than once, and when she passed out or fell down, she was carried to the living room, which is right off the kitchen, just basically steps away, and laid on the couch. But then her attacker realized she wasn't okay, and he panicked. He moved her to her bedroom, and he began cleaning the kitchen floor, as well as the blood in the living room, the couch cushions that had blood on them, the couch, the coffee table, the floor, etc. Once that was done, he went into her room to check on her and panicked again, finding that she'd lost even more blood. And there was blood all over her bed, all over her bedding, everything. And while he'd been in the kitchen and the living room cleaning up the blood from there, she had gotten worse. So at that point, LeeAnn's attacker felt that the bathtub was the best place to put her because he couldn't keep washing soft things like fabric, couch cushions, carpets, comforters, things like that. And the bathtub would be easier to clean while he now goes in and has to clean the bedroom. That seems to me what happened here. And it seems that this happened over the course of probably several hours. Now, a person who knows Jay Tolson told the private investigator that Jay had attempted to call them at approximately 4 a.m. on July 22nd, 2020. This individual didn't answer that call, but when they called Jay back, like 4 hours later at 8:30 a.m., they said that Jay was crying and stating that he'd found LeeAnn with blood coming out of her nose. This person told Jay, well, hang up and call 911, and Jay was freaking out, and he was saying, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, I don't want to call 911 because I don't want to be blamed for this, man. Like, I'm just going to take off. Now, this person believes that if they had not called Jay back that morning, Jay probably wouldn't have called 911 because he was just planning to leave LeeAnn in her condition at that house. Now, as it was, Jay didn't pick up the phone to call the police until almost an hour after that phone call, meaning at the minimum, LeeAnn laid there and bled out for an hour during which she could have received medical attention that could have saved her life had Jay called the police when her injuries first happened. Now, I say 1 hour at minimum because we honestly don't know exactly when LeeAnn was attacked or when she became injured. Jay called his friend at 4 a.m. initially. Maybe that call came after his fight with LeeAnn when she'd packed his things into a plastic bag, told him to leave. Maybe he was calling his friend to vent, complain about LeeAnn. Maybe he was calling his friend to ask for a place to crash for the next few nights. Either that or the attack on LeeAnn happened at that point around 4 a.m. and Jay was calling his friend who said an alibi, to try to say like, oh, I just walked in at 4 a.m. and LeeAnn was like in the bathroom bleeding and, I don't know what's going on. What do I do? The same thing he did at 8:30 a.m., but instead he was going to do it at 4 a.m. In that case, that means the attack happened much earlier and LeeAnn was denied medical attention and help for much longer. Now, Jay Tolson did not go into work on the morning of July 22nd, 2020, and when someone from his job called him around 10:30 a.m., they said, quote, he said that the ambulance showed up, that they were treating him like it was a domestic violence situation, that they weren't speaking to him or telling him anything, and he didn't know what was going on. At night, he was leaving and coming back here, end quote. So I don't know exactly what that means, the last part. At night, he was leaving and coming back here. But two things I took from this. One, if what Jay is saying is true, when first responders and possibly law enforcement arrived, they treated him with suspicion. Now, he called 911 around 9:30 and the person from his work called around 10:30, so I'm almost wondering if maybe the police weren't there yet and it was first responders like EMTs in the fire department that were treating Jay with suspicion. But either way, people on the scene, the first people on the scene, clearly thought like it's best to treat this person as if he could be a potential suspect. So what changed after that? And at the end where it says at night he was leaving and coming back, I think that means that Jay was telling his friend, I wasn't sleeping at LeeAnn's house at night. I was leaving at night and coming back during the day or in the morning. So that way he could say, like, I don't know what happened, but she must have been drinking. She must have fallen in the kitchen. And then this happened while I was gone because I've been leaving and coming back here. So basically, I wasn't here last night when this happened. I just walked in this morning. Now, on Thursday, July 23rd, Jay Tolson did go into work and he spoke to someone he worked with who said, quote, I know for a fact he got physical. He admitted it to me while we were working and started crying. I even tried to cheer him up. He never once said her head was caved in, just lied and said she OD'd. I told him to turn himself in. He keeps lying to me. Told me she ate the whole bottle of muscle relaxers and slipped, end quote. So when I first read this quote, I was like, this doesn't make a lot of sense because you said at the beginning of your statement that you know he got physical, that you know Jay got physical, that he admitted it to you, but then you said he kept lying to you and telling you that LeeAnn had OD'd. So what I think this person is saying in this statement is Jay had gotten physical previously and Jay had confessed that he'd gotten physical with LeeAnn previously to this person he worked with, like while they were working, and he cried about it and he was upset and he confessed getting physical. But then when LeeAnn died, Jay was like, oh no, I didn't get physical. She ate a whole bottle of muscle relaxers and, had a bunch of alcohol and she slipped and it was an accident. But the person he's working with is like, I don't believe that because you've told me you've gotten physical before. I think that's what that meant. And another statement came from a person who knew both Jay and LeeAnn and who had interacted with Jay on his last day of work before LeeAnn died. And this person said, quote, he's been acting very strange lately. He would call LeeAnn and just swear at her and call her names. I don't know what his deal is, but he fucked up royally this time. He was angry as fuck at her, telling me he was going to beat her ass when they got home. He'd been drinking all day. He was a total asshole to her because he had left his phone in her truck, end quote. So from what I can tell, Jay does like construction, maybe like roofing and stuff. So I think that this person who, once again, who works with Jay is saying that like all day while they were at work, probably on the job, putting like a roof on, Jay was drinking, complaining about LeeAnn. He'd left his phone in her truck, so he was pissed off. And he told this person on his last day of work before he went home to LeeAnn and LeeAnn died, he told this person he was going to go and beat LeeAnn's ass. And he was really angry. So that's very compelling. And another witness, a close friend and neighbor of LeeAnn's, talked about a time shortly before LeeAnn's death when he had let himself into her house to collect his mail. Now, this person and LeeAnn were very friendly, and it was very normal for LeeAnn to grab his mail for him if he was like out of town, and then he would come and get his mail when he got back into town. He said he was in the cottage, LeeAnn's cottage, grabbing his mail when he heard LeeAnn and Jay arguing in another room. And he said Jay must have heard him come in because then Jay came into the room and confronted him, and Jay was being super aggressive. And the witness stated that he ended up just leaving and walking away because he felt that Jay was looking for trouble. And this person wanted to avoid an altercation because he knew Jay to be an abusive person who'd been abusive to LeeAnn in the past. And this person had also witnessed Jay being abusive to LeeAnn's dog before. And you know what I say, if you're willing to hurt a defenseless animal, you're capable of anything. So I guess once the Kitty Hawk Police Department had all this information that they didn't even get themselves, they decided it was time to make a move. And 3 months after the death of LeeAnn Hartleben, a grand jury in Dare County indicted Jay Tolson and charged him with 1 count of second-degree murder. He was taken into custody on October 26, 2020 by police in Bangor, Maine. And at first glance, it's not really clear what Jay was doing in Maine, but LeeAnn's cousin Trisha Calhoun claims he was there for rehab. And it would be a convenient way to try and avoid an arrest that you know is coming, like checking yourself into rehab. It did appear that Jay had a drinking problem, so he probably thought, like, if I'm in rehab, they can't come and get me. But they can, and they did. Now, why did it take 3 months? I don't know. This isn't like the Idaho murders, where some, terrible crime happened and somebody came in like a thief in the night and left and nobody has any idea who did it. And they have to like do DNA and look at surveillance and track this person down and figure out, basically a needle in a haystack situation. They got to figure out who did it out of everybody in the world. This is not one of those situations. This is a situation where it's like there was one person with her when she died, one person called 911, one person was dating her, one person got broken up with her, one person has been known to be abusive to her and have an anger problem, one person was threatening to beat her ass days before she died. There wasn't a ton of investigative work that the police had to do in order to see that Jay Tolson was a suspicious person, and in fact, the PI firm did most of that initial investigation for them. So what took so long? What took 3 months? Even if you said you're waiting for the autopsy results, those came back in like August, I believe, and still Jay Tolson was not arrested until October, the end of October, the 26th. So the question is, what took so long? And a lot of people have that question. And Jay Tolson has since pleaded not guilty. He's awaiting a trial, which has been scheduled and rescheduled for almost 2 years now. It looks like his new trial is scheduled to begin March 6th. But it could be rescheduled again. Like, honestly, it has been rescheduled so many times. It's crazy. And this is obviously getting under the skin of LeeAnn's family. Like, they already felt they had to do so much work to get even close to an arrest. And now that the arrest has been made, and just for 2 years, the trial's been pushed off. And LeeAnn's family says they're not interested in a plea deal. They want to see Jay Tolson stand trial and answer for what they believe he did to LeeAnn Hartleben. And like I said, there isn't a ton of information about this case. There's so many questions, so many specifics that I'd like to get nailed down. And I hope I will once I am able to talk to the appropriate people, if they talk to me. But I did want to talk to you guys about this case because I think it's important to get LeeAnn's story out there. And, kind of get an inside glance into what's happening in a lot of places around the world, right? These things that happen behind the scenes with law enforcement and politicians and the DA's office when it comes to deciding whether to prosecute crimes, whether to even investigate crimes, these things that happen when the rest of us aren't necessarily looking, right? People die and then it gets written off as an accident, but it may not be an accident. Look at Alan Greenberg. Look at LeeAnn. This happens in small towns like Kitty Hawk and big cities like Philadelphia. And only when someone stands up and says enough and starts a social media campaign putting a specific law enforcement entity or person on blast, only then does something move forward. Only then does something happen when, the police department and the DA's office are getting so much attention and so much heat and so much negativity that they're like, well, we got to do something. And that's unfortunate because usually the people who are making the noise and pushing these law enforcement agencies into doing the right thing, usually those people are family members of the victim. But what about the victims who don't have family members or don't have close family members or don't have family members who are willing to put everything in their lives on hold to focus specifically on finding justice for, this victim? What about those victims who don't have anybody to be their voice? We really need to start demanding more accountability from these law enforcement agencies, not only when, Twitter's watching, but all the time when no one's watching, when only God is watching. Now, can I say for sure that the Kitty Hawk Police Department would never have arrested Jay Tolson if not for the public pressure? Of course not. I can't say that for sure at all. They could have been making all sorts of moves behind the scenes that not one of us were aware of. They could have been following him around. They could have been tapping his phone. They could have been pulling his cell phone records, things like that. If they were doing that stuff, I feel like by now you should have probably let us know that you were doing that, because he's already in custody and there's going to be a trial. So I think it's safe to say, I know you guys thought we weren't doing shit for those 3 months, but here's proof that we pulled Jay Tolson's cell phone records and pinged his phone and got his phone locations on this date, when you thought we weren't doing anything. And here's proof that we've put him under surveillance to make sure that he didn't hurt anybody else. And here's proof that, we've talked to his friends before you guys gave us, a hard time for it. That's the time you should be doing that now if you want people to, back off. So if they were doing stuff behind the scenes, I'm really glad. But I think that there's a good chance if LeeAnn's family hadn't made a lot of noise and if they hadn't took to social media and if social media and the community of Kitty Hawk hadn't put pressure on the police, Jay Tolson maybe wouldn't have gotten arrested. But I do wonder if the DA and the Kitty Hawk police are going to have a hard time explaining during the trial why they initially seemed to decide to take Jay's word for it and not process LeeAnn's home as a potential crime scene, if that's what happened. Jay was LeeAnn's boyfriend, which makes him suspect number one to begin with. Not to mention he was alone in her house with her. Not to mention he was the last person to see her before she was bleeding all over her house. Not to mention they had just reportedly argued, and reportedly LeeAnn had ended things, which means he had a motive and he was angry. Not to mention there was blood in at least 4 rooms of that very small cottage. Nothing about that incident spelled out accident. And even if the police had walked in and the scene looked like a textbook accidental fall, they still should have processed the house as a crime scene just in case information came to light at a later time that changed the context of what happened that day. Like, for instance, they found out after interviewing people that LeeAnn had just broken up with Jay, and he may have been angry and had a motive or, lost his temper. The fact that they didn't process the scene is a huge problem, and I hope it doesn't become a problem for the prosecution during the trial when Jay's attorneys say all this evidence that was collected, specifically the blood evidence, that all needs to be thrown out because it wasn't collected during the process of an official police investigation, and the chain of custody is all messed up, and we don't feel comfortable with, LeeAnn's family and their private investigator collecting evidence that could potentially put our client away for life for murder because they already think that he did it, and so maybe they framed him or maybe they, did something in a certain way to make it look worse for him. That is what Jay's lawyer could say. That's what they could argue during the trial. And that is my main concern, that because the police department were so hesitant and so stalled in beginning their investigation, and because LeeAnn's family thought they had to take matters into their own hands, which I mean they did, or nothing would have gotten done, that Jay's legal team is going to use that to sort of just get the whole thing thrown out. And with enough reasonable doubt, without that blood evidence, there would be enough reasonable doubt to say, to have a jury at least say, like, we don't know if Jay Tolson did this 100%. He may be innocent, and so we're not going to find him guilty. And I do think that, personally, in my opinion, allegedly, don't come for me, I do think Jay Tolson is responsible for this. It just doesn't really add up. And I'm sad because LeeAnn Hartleben has 2 kids, 2 kids that now are going to grow up without their mother for absolutely no reason. And, I hate to say it, but like, just don't be so nice to people at this point. Like, especially if you're a woman, don't be so nice to people. Don't let people into your heart, into your home, unless they've proved to you that they belong there and that they're worth it. And this is not victim blaming at all. It's like, how can we learn from this? You want to help. And I know, because I know it's hard to believe because I'm, myself, but I am kind of a bleeding heart, and I'm always putting myself out there to help other people. And I never feel like I'm doing enough either. I always feel guilty that I'm not doing enough, and there's more that I could be doing. And more than once, I've been burned, but luckily never like this. But I look back at all the times I opened my home and my heart to people who were, not super trustworthy, maybe not super reliable, maybe had some nefarious intentions, and times I got, robbed. All sorts of things happened, all sorts of things happened. I got burned, and over time I learned, like, don't open your heart and home to just anybody. Make sure it's somebody who deserves to be there and who has proven to you that they deserve to be there. Because at the end of the day, we don't want people to not be nice to each other, but we also don't want all of these nice people to be getting murdered and picked off because they are just trusting the wrong person or the wrong people. It's very sad. And my heart does go out to LeeAnn's family, her cousin Trisha, who's fighting tirelessly for her. Hopefully Trisha gets back to me on Facebook. But either way, thank you all for being here. Share this video if you think it's worth sharing. I do think it's worth sharing, at least, at this point, because the trial is hopefully going to be coming up soon, and not enough people are aware of this case or aware of LeeAnn in general. Like I said, when I was looking this case up, I kept running into the other LeeAnn Fletcher, which is also another case I want to cover, but it seemed like, there wasn't a ton on LeeAnn Fletcher Hartleben. So now hopefully, we'll get her name out there a little bit more and we'll find justice for her. So share this video if you think it's worth sharing. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Links are in the description box. Also, link is in the description box for Bright Sellers. Check them out. Thank you all so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe. New video coming soon, and so I'll see you very soon. Bye.
Battle's going straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name, better say I Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's killing you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood